The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as Maya balanced 3 plates on her left arm and 2 wine glasses in her right hand. She'd been working at the Sterling Room for almost 2 years now, and she knew every inch of this fancy restaurant. Tonight was different, though. The entire place had been rented out for a private party, and her manager had made it very clear that everything needed to be perfect. "These people have serious money," he'd told the staff earlier that evening. "No mistakes. No complaints. Just smile and serve." Maya didn't need to be told twice. She needed this job. Her younger sister Sophie was in her 2nd year of college, and those tuition payments weren't going to make themselves. Every shift mattered. Every tip counted. The party was for some real estate guy named Richard Blackwell. Maya had seen his face in magazines before, always wearing an expensive suit and that confident smile that rich people seem to wear like a uniform. Tonight he was celebrating some big business deal, and he'd invited what looked like half of Manhattan's wealthy elite to join him. Maya weaved through the crowd, offering appetizers and refilling champagne glasses. The guests barely looked at her. To them, she was just part of the furniture, like the velvet curtains or the polished silverware. She was used to it by now. In this world, servers were supposed to be invisible. Can you believe the commission on the Riverside project? One woman in a diamond necklace said to her friend. "Absolutely insane," the friend replied. "Richard's made more this quarter than most people make in a lifetime." Maya kept her face neutral as she cleared their empty plates. She didn't envy these people exactly, but sometimes she wondered what it felt like to not count every dollar, to not wake up at night worrying about making rent. She was heading back to the kitchen when she heard another server, Thomas, talking near the bar. "You went to music school, right?" he asked her during a quiet moment. "A long time ago," Maya said, loading her tray with fresh drinks. "Why? Just curious. My daughter's learning piano. It's so expensive, though. The lessons, the books, everything." Maya smiled. "It's worth it if she loves it. Music is special." She didn't say more than that. She never talked about Juilliard, about the scholarship, about the dreams she'd had before everything fell apart. That was a different life, a different version of herself that she'd packed away years ago. What she didn't notice was that Richard Blackwell had been standing close enough to hear them. About an hour into the party, Maya was serving desserts when she heard her name called out. Not quietly, not politely, but loud enough that several nearby conversations stopped. "Excuse me, waitress. You there?" She turned to see Richard standing near the grand piano in the corner of the ballroom. He was pointing directly at her. Her stomach dropped. "Yes, sir?" she said, walking over with her professional smile firmly in place. "I overheard you talking about music school," Richard said, his voice carrying across the room. More people were turning to look now. "You studied piano, didn't you?" "I did a long time ago," Maya replied carefully. "Wonderful." Richard clapped his hands together. "We have this beautiful piano here and nobody's playing it. I insist you entertain us." The request hit her like cold water. "Oh, I appreciate that, but I'm working right now." "I'm sure one of your guests—" "Nonsense," Richard interrupted, and there was something in his tone that made her uneasy. He was smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Come on, don't be modest. I'm sure everyone would love to hear you play." Several guests had gathered around now, curious about the commotion. Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks. "Really, sir, I couldn't. I haven't played in years and I need to." "I'll tell you what," Richard said, pulling out his wallet. He made a show of it, taking his time, making sure everyone was watching. "I'll give you $100 to play us a song. That's probably more than you make in tips all night, isn't it?" Some of the guests laughed. Maya felt her face burning now. She could see what this was. Entertainment for him. A way to show off in front of his friends by making the help dance for pocket change. "That's very generous. But I really should get back to work," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What's the problem?" Richard pressed. $100 for 5 minutes of playing. Seems like a good deal to me." Before Maya could respond, her manager appeared at her elbow. She could see the stress in his face, the silent plea in his eyes. This was a big client. A very big client. The Sterling Room couldn't afford to upset him. "Maya," the manager said quietly, "perhaps you could play just one song? It would be a nice gesture." She wanted to say no. Every part of her wanted to walk away with her head high. But she thought about Sophie's tuition bill that was due next week. She thought about the rent that was always somehow just barely covered. She thought about how quickly she could be replaced if she upset the wrong person. Of course, she heard herself say, "I'd be happy to." The guests applauded politely as she made her way to the piano. She could hear their whispers, see their smirks. They thought they were about to see a struggling waitress fumble through chopsticks or maybe a shaky version of some simple tune. This was their entertainment now. Watch the poor server try to play piano for the rich people. Richard stood to the side, arms crossed, looking pleased with himself. He'd created a moment, a story he could tell at other parties. "Remember that time I made the waitress play piano?" Maya sat down at the bench. The piano was beautiful, a glossy black Steinway that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. She hadn't sat at a real piano in so long. Her hands were shaking as she placed them on the keys. The room got quiet, waiting. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. And then she remembered. She remembered being 17 years old at Juilliard, when everything had seemed possible. She remembered her mother sitting in the audience at her first recital, crying with pride. She remembered the feeling of music flowing through her fingers, of being so connected to the sound that she and the piano became the same thing. She remembered who she had been before life took it all away. Maya opened her eyes. Her hands had stopped shaking. She looked at the keys in front of her, and for the first time in 7 years, she let herself feel everything she'd buried deep inside. This man wanted to humiliate her. He wanted to buy her dignity for $100 and laugh about with his wealthy friends. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. Maya placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes filled the ballroom like water filling an empty glass. Soft at first, almost gentle, the opening bars of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 floated through the air. Maya's fingers moved across the keys with a certainty that surprised even her. For a moment, the guests didn't react. They were still expecting something simple, something forgettable. Maybe a pop song or a basic classical piece that everyone knew, the kind of thing you'd hear in an elevator. But then the music began to build. Maya's left hand established the deep, rolling foundation while her right hand started weaving the melody above it. The piece was one of the most difficult in all of classical piano repertoire. It required not just technical skill but emotional depth, physical stamina, and complete control. It was the kind of piece that concert pianists spent months preparing to perform, and Maya was playing it from memory. The woman in the diamond necklace stopped mid-conversation, her mouth slightly open. The man beside her set down his champagne glass without taking his eyes off Maya. One by one, every conversation in the room died away. The silence was so complete that the only sound was the piano, filling every corner of the enormous ballroom. Richard's smug expression had frozen on his face. He stood perfectly still, watching Maya's hands fly across the keys. This wasn't what he'd planned. This wasn't supposed to happen. Maya didn't see any of them anymore. She was somewhere else entirely. Her fingers remembered every note, every dynamic, every subtle shift in tempo. It was like meeting an old friend after years apart. The muscle memory was still there, buried under years of serving tables and worrying about bills and pretending that part of her life was over. But it wasn't over. It had just been sleeping. The music swelled into the first major crescendo. Maya's hands moved with impossible speed, hitting complex chord progressions that would make most pianists nervous. But she wasn't nervous anymore. She was angry. All the humiliation she'd felt moments ago, all the years of pushing down her dreams, all the times she'd walked past music stores and felt that ache in her chest, it all poured out through her fingers. This wasn't just playing. This was 7 years of silence breaking open. A woman near the back of the room had tears streaming down her face. She wasn't the only one. There was something raw and honest in Maya's playing that cut through all the expensive jewelry and designer clothes. It reminded them of something real, something they'd maybe forgotten existed. Thomas, the server who'd asked about music school, had stopped working entirely. He stood by the kitchen doors, his tray forgotten in his hands, watching his coworker transform into someone he'd never see. And before, the other servers had gathered there too, all of them transfixed. They'd worked alongside Maya for months, some for years. They knew her as the quiet one who always picked up extra shifts, who never complained, who helped train new staff even when she didn't have to. But this? None of them had known she could do this. Maya reached the second movement and the music shifted. Where before it had been powerful and dramatic, now it became tender, almost heartbreaking. Her touch on the keys softened. Each note seemed to hang in the air a moment longer than it should, filled with longing. She was thinking about her parents now, about sitting at their old upright piano while her mother made dinner, the smell of garlic and tomatoes drifting from the kitchen. About her father standing behind her, his hand on her shoulder, listening with his eyes closed. About the day she got her acceptance letter to Juilliard, and they'd all cried together in the living room. About the police officer at her dorm room door, his face grave, telling her there'd been an accident. The music captured all of it. Every guest in that ballroom felt it, even if they didn't understand why. They felt the loss, the love, the weight of impossible choices. Some of them thought of their own buried dreams, their own roads not taken. Richard had moved closer to the piano without realizing it. He was staring at Maya like he was seeing her for the first time. His face had gone pale. The amusement was completely gone now, replaced by something that might have been shame or maybe just shock. The third movement approached. Maya took a breath and launched into it. This was the hardest part, the section that separated good pianists from great ones. Her hands crossed over each other, fingers flying across the keys in patterns so complex they seemed impossible. The tempo increased. The dynamic soared. Everyone in the room had forgotten where they were. They weren't at a party anymore. They were in a concert hall witnessing something extraordinary. An older woman in the crowd, someone with silver hair and kind eyes, had pulled out her phone. She was recording, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to keep the camera steady. She was a music professor at a prestigious conservatory, and she'd been to hundreds of concerts in her life. She knew talent when she heard it. And this was more than talent. This was genius that had been forced into hiding. Maya's manager stood frozen near the bar. He was calculating in his head, trying to understand what was happening. He'd hired her 2 years ago because she was reliable and punctual, and didn't cause problems. He'd never asked if she had a college degree. He'd never asked about her life before the Sterling room. Now he was realizing he'd had no idea who was working for him this whole time. The final crescendo built like a wave. Maya's whole body was involved now, leaning into the keys, her hands striking with power and precision. The piano rang out with layers of sound so rich they seemed to shake the chandeliers overhead. Every person in that room felt it in their chest. That thundering cascade of notes that Rachmaninoff had crafted to stir the soul. And then, suddenly it was over. The final chord rang out and slowly faded into silence. Maya's hands remained on the keys for a moment, her head bowed, her breathing heavy. She'd just played nearly 15 minutes of one of the most demanding pieces in classical piano literature, without sheet music, without warm-up, without having touched a real piano in years. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Maya lifted her hands from the keys and stood up. She smoothed down her server's apron, suddenly very aware of her surroundings again. The ballroom came back into focus. All those people, all those eyes, all staring at her. Then someone started clapping. The sound broke the spell. Within seconds, the entire room erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was thunderous, the kind of ovation usually reserved for Broadway finales or championship victories. People were on their feet, some of them shouting, the older woman with silver hair wiping tears from her cheeks. Maya stood there, overwhelmed. She hadn't expected this. She'd expected to play something simple, to get through the humiliation, to collect the $100 and go back to serving desserts. She hadn't expected to feel alive again. Richard was clapping too, but his hands moved slowly, mechanically. He looked like someone had just told him the sky was green. Everything he'd thought about the situation, about Maya, about himself, had just been turned upside down. Maya gave a small, dignified nod to the room. Then, without saying a word, she walked back toward the kitchen. Her shift wasn't over. There were still tables to clear, glasses to refill, guests to serve. But everything had changed, and everyone in that room knew it. Maya's hands were shaking again as she picked up a tray of empty champagne glasses. But this time it wasn't from nerves or humiliation. It was adrenaline, pure and simple. Her heart was still pounding from the performance, and she felt strangely exposed, like she'd just shown a room full of strangers the most private parts of her soul. She pushed through the kitchen doors, grateful for the noise and chaos of the staff area. The dishwasher was running, someone was shouting about needing more dessert plates, and everything felt blessedly normal. Maya. Thomas grabbed her arm gently. That was incredible. Why didn't you ever tell anyone you could play like that? She gave him a tired smile. It never came up. But before she could escape further into the kitchen, her manager appeared. Maya, table 7 is asking for you specifically. Table 7? Yeah, some older woman. She seems pretty insistent. Maya sighed and headed back out into the ballroom. The energy had shifted now. People were talking animatedly, many of them glancing her way as she moved through the room. She felt like a specimen under glass. Table 7 was near the windows. The woman sitting there was the one with silver hair that Maya had noticed during her performance. She had an elegant presence, the kind that came from confidence rather than money. When she saw Maya approaching, her whole face lit up. There you are, the woman said warmly. Please sit down for just a moment. I promise I'll make it quick. Maya glanced around nervously. I really should be working. I already cleared it with your manager. The woman gestured to the empty chair. Please, my name is Eleanor Chen. I teach at the Manhattan Conservatory. Something in Maya's chest tightened. She sat down slowly, keeping her posture straight, professional. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes sharp but kind. That was Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto. You played it from memory, without sheet music after presumably not touching a piano for quite some time. Am I correct? Yes, ma'am. Where did you study? Maya hesitated. This was the part she never talked about. The part that hurt too much to examine. But something about Eleanor's face, about the genuine interest there, made her want to answer honestly. Juilliard, she said quietly. But I didn't finish. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. Juilliard. I thought so. The technique is unmistakable. What year? I started when I was 16. Full scholarship. I was there for 3 years before. Maya trailed off. Before what? The words came slowly at first, then faster like a dam breaking. Maya told her about her parents, about the car accident in her junior year, about becoming a guardian to 10-year-old Sophie overnight, about the impossible choice between her education and her sister's stability. I couldn't do both, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. The scholarship covered tuition, but not living expenses. Not for 2 people. And Sophie needed me. She needed a home, needed to stay in school, needed someone to be there when she woke up from nightmares about mom and dad. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her expression growing more pained with each detail. So I left, Maya continued. I got a job, then another job, then this one. Sophie's in college now. She's studying engineering at NYU. She's brilliant. And she's happy. That's what matters. And you? Eleanor asked gently. Are you happy? The question hit Maya harder than she expected. She looked down at her hands, at the calluses from carrying heavy trays, at the scar on her thumb from a broken glass last month. I'm fine, she said automatically. I have a job. We have an apartment. Sophie's going to graduate without debt. That's more than a lot of people can say. That's not what I asked. Maya met Eleanor's eyes and found no judgment there, only understanding. She felt something crack open inside her chest. I miss it, she admitted, and saying it out loud felt like a confession, every single day. I walk past music stores and have to cross the street because it hurts too much to look. I hear piano music and have to leave wherever I am. I buried it because I had to, but tonight, she paused. Tonight it all came back. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. I'm going to give you my card. I want you to call me this week. Ma'am, I appreciate that, but I don't have time for lessons or just call me, Eleanor said firmly. Please, as a favor to an old woman who knows talent when she sees it. Before Maya could respond, someone else approached the table. She looked up to see Richard standing there, his hands in his pockets, looking more uncomfortable than she'd ever seen a wealthy man look. Excuse me, he said. I don't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to. He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. I wanted to apologize. Maya stared at him, not sure she'd heard correctly. Richard continued, speaking quickly like he needed to get it all out. What I did earlier, putting you on the spot like that, offering you money like it was some kind of joke, that was wrong. That was cruel. I thought. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know what I thought. That it would be funny, I guess. That I was being generous. But watching you play, hearing your story just now, I realized I was just being an arrogant jerk. The ballroom had gone quieter. Other guests were watching this interaction, sensing something significant happening. I humiliated you for my own entertainment, Richard said, and you responded with grace and with a performance that frankly put everyone in this room to shame, myself included. I'm sorry, Maya didn't know what to say. She'd expected many things tonight, but not this, not an apology from Richard Blackwell. Thank you, she finally said. I appreciate that. Richard nodded awkwardly and started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. You have an extraordinary gift. After he left, Eleanor was smiling. Well, that's not something you see every day. Richard Blackwell apologizing to anyone. It doesn't change what happened, Maya said, but there was no bitterness in her voice. Just truth. No, it doesn't, Eleanor agreed. But it's a start. People can surprise you sometimes. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Maya finished her shift, but everywhere she went, guests stopped her. They wanted to know her name, her story, where she'd studied. Several offered her business cards. One woman who owned an art gallery asked if she'd be interested in performing at a private event. Another man, a music producer, asked if she'd ever considered recording. Maya collected the cards politely, not sure what to do with any of it. This wasn't her life anymore. She was a server, not a pianist. But as she changed out of her work clothes at the end of the night, she found Eleanor's card in her pocket. She ran her thumb over the embossed letters. Manhattan Conservatory, Professor of Piano. Thomas caught her in the hallway on her way out. You going to call her? I don't know, Maya said honestly.
What would be the point?
The point? Thomas shook his head. Maya, I've been working restaurants for 15 years. You know what I've never seen? Someone play piano like that. You know what else I've never seen? Someone with an actual chance to get out of this grind just walk away from it. Maya thought about Sophie, about bills, about responsibility, but she also thought about how it had felt to play tonight. How alive she'd felt, how right. She slipped the card back into her pocket. Maybe I'll think about it. As she stepped out into the cool night air, her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Just saw a video of you playing piano at some fancy party. What? Call me immediately. Maya's stomach dropped. A video. Someone had posted it online. She pulled up social media on her phone and there it was, already shared hundreds of times. The silver-haired woman must have posted it. The caption read, Hidden genius discovered working as a server. Most incredible performance I've heard in years. The comments were pouring in. People from all over were watching, sharing, talking about the mysterious waitress who could play Rachmaninoff like she was born to it. Maya stared at her phone, watching the numbers climb. Shares, likes, comments all growing by the second. Her private moment of defiance had just become very, very public. And somewhere in the back of her mind, underneath the panic and confusion, she felt the tiniest spark of something she hadn't felt in 7 years. Hope. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat on her couch in her tiny apartment, watching the video views climb into the thousands, then tens of thousands. Her phone kept buzzing with messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Old classmates from Juilliard, former teachers, people she'd lost touch with when she disappeared from the music world. Sophie had come over straight away, still in her pajamas, her eyes wide with excitement and confusion. Why didn't you tell me? Sophie asked, curled up on the other end of the couch. All these years you never said anything about Juilliard, about any of this. Maya kept her eyes on her phone screen. What was there to say? It was over. I made my choice. Your choice was me, Sophie said quietly. You gave up everything for me. I gave up one thing to keep the most important thing, Maya corrected. You. There was never a question, Soph, not for 1 second. Sophie wiped her eyes. I always wondered why you never had a piano. Why you'd change the radio station whenever classical music came on. I thought you just didn't like it anymore. I liked it too much, Maya admitted. It hurt to hear it and know I couldn't have it. They stayed up until 3 in the morning talking about things they'd never discussed before. About their parents, about the accident, about all the small sacrifices Maya had made that Sophie had never noticed. By the time Sophie finally went home, Maya felt exhausted and raw, and somehow lighter than she'd been in years. The next morning, Maya called Eleanor. She didn't know why exactly. Maybe because she was too tired to talk herself out of it. Maybe because that spark of hope from last night hadn't gone away. Eleanor answered on the second ring. Maya, I was hoping you'd call. I saw the video, Maya said. It's everywhere. I know. I'm sorry if that feels invasive, but I'm not sorry I posted it. The world needed to see what I saw. Eleanor paused. Can you meet me for coffee this afternoon? I have something to discuss with you. 2 hours later, Maya sat across from Eleanor at a quiet cafe in the Upper West Side. Eleanor slid a folder across the table. A pianist named David Chen was supposed to perform with the New York Philharmonic 3 weeks from now, Eleanor began. He's my nephew, actually. Yesterday, he was in a car accident. He's going to be fine, but his right hand was badly injured. He can't perform. Maya's heart started beating faster. She had a feeling she knew where this was going. The Philharmonic needs a replacement, Eleanor continued. The piece was going to be Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same one you played last night. I've already spoken to the conductor. After seeing your video, he wants to meet you. They want to offer you the spot. The cafe seemed to tilt sideways. Maya gripped her coffee cup to steady herself. That's impossible. I can't. I haven't practiced seriously in 7 years. I don't have a piano. I work 6 days a week. I can't just listen to me, Eleanor said firmly. This is the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime. Most pianists spend their entire careers hoping for a chance to perform with the New York Philharmonic. You're being handed it. I'd have to take time off work. I have bills, rent, Sophie's tuition already handled. Maya blinked. What? Eleanor opened the folder and pulled out a document. An anonymous donor has come forward. They're offering to cover your living expenses for the next 2 months, including your rent and your sister's tuition. They've also arranged for you to have access to a private practice studio with a concert grand piano, available to you 24 hours a day. Maya stared at the paper in front of her, not quite believing what she was reading. The amount listed was more than she made in 3 months. Who would do this? Who's the donor? They've chosen to remain anonymous, but they were at the party last night. They heard you play and they believe in your talent. Maya's mind was racing. Someone at that party. Someone who'd seen Richard humiliate her and then heard her response. Someone with enough money to just casually offer to support her for 2 months. A horrible suspicion crept into her mind. Is it Richard Blackwell? Eleanor's expression gave nothing away. The donor wishes to remain anonymous. Does it matter who it is? Yes, Maya said immediately. Then no, I don't know. She put her head in her hands. This feels like charity, like pity. It's not pity, Eleanor said gently. It's investment. Someone believes you have something worth investing in, and honestly, after last night, so do a lot of people. Your video has been viewed over 500,000 times now. The story is spreading. People want to see what happens next. Maya thought about her tiny apartment, about her closet full of server uniforms, about the way her feet ached at the end of every shift. She thought about walking past music stores with that hollow feeling in her chest. About all the years she'd told herself that part of her life was dead, but it wasn't dead. Last night had proven that. It had just been waiting. 3 weeks isn't much time, she said slowly. No, it's not. You'd have to practice 8 hours a day, maybe more. It would be brutal. The pressure would be intense. And there's no guarantee you'd be ready. But you think I can do it. Eleanor met her eyes steadily. I know you can do it. The question is whether you believe it. Maya sat there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Then she pulled out her phone and called her manager at the Sterling room. Hi, it's Maya. I need to talk to you about taking a leave of absence. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of Maya's life. She woke up at 6 every morning and went straight to the practice studio. Her fingers were rusty at first, stumbling over passages that used to be second nature, but slowly, painfully, it started coming back. Eleanor came by every afternoon to coach her. She was demanding, pushing Maya harder than any teacher ever had. Again, she'd say when Maya finished a section. Your dynamics are muddy. Again. Or, you're rushing the tempo. Feel it, don't think it. Again. Maya's fingers blistered, then calloused. Her back ached from hours hunched over the piano. She dreamed in music, hearing the concerto even in her sleep. Sophie stopped by with food most evenings, making sure Maya actually ate something. You look exhausted, she'd say, and Maya would just nod because it was true. But it was a different kind of exhaustion than she'd felt serving tables. This was the exhaustion of pushing yourself toward something instead of just surviving. On the 10th day, something clicked. Maya was working through the third movement when suddenly everything aligned. Her fingers, her mind, her heart, all moving together like they used to. The music poured out of her with a power and clarity that made Eleanor stop her pacing and just listen. When Maya finished, Eleanor had tears in her eyes. "There you are," she said softly. "I knew you were still in there, but not everything was going smoothly." The media attention had gotten intense. Reporters had tracked down Maya's address. Entertainment websites were running stories about the Cinderella pianist. Some praised her talent. Others questioned whether she deserved the opportunity, whether she was just a viral sensation rather than a real musician. The comments online were brutal sometimes. "She got lucky with one performance. This is just a publicity stunt. She'll choke under real pressure." Maya tried not to read them, but it was hard to look away. The doubt crept in during her practice sessions, making her second-guess herself, making her fingers stumble. One particularly bad day, she called Eleanor in tears. "What if they're right? What if I'm not ready? What if I get up there and freeze?" Eleanor's response was immediate and firm. "Then you freeze. Then you fail. And then you get up and try again. But you don't quit before you even start. You don't give fear that kind of power." With 1 week left before the performance, the anonymous donor reached out through Eleanor with another message. They wanted to meet Maya in person. No obligations, no strings attached. Just a conversation. Maya agreed, curious and nervous in equal measure. Eleanor arranged the meeting at a quiet restaurant. When Maya walked in, she wasn't entirely surprised to see Richard Blackwell sitting at a corner table. He stood when he saw her, looking almost as nervous as she felt. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know you probably don't want to see me." "You're the donor," Maya said, sitting down across from him. "Yes. I hope that's okay." "Eleanor said you were suspicious. Why are you doing this?" Maya asked directly. "Is it guilt?" Richard considered the question seriously. "Partly, yes. What I did to you was unforgivable. I can't take it back, but I can try to make something good come from it." He paused. "But it's more than that. When I heard you play, it was like being hit in the chest. I realized I'd been surrounded by expensive things my whole life, but I'd never actually been in the presence of something truly valuable. Not like that. Not like you." Maya didn't know what to say to that. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Richard continued. "I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that this isn't charity, and it isn't pity. It's just trying to do one decent thing in a life where I haven't done nearly enough of them." They talked for over an hour. Maya found herself telling him about the pressure she was feeling, about the fear of failure, about all the voices in her head telling her she wasn't good enough. Richard listened without trying to fix anything, without offering empty reassurances. As she was leaving, he said one more thing. "Whatever happens at that concert, you've already won. You got back up. After everything tried to knock you down, you got back up. That's what matters." Maya went back to the practice studio that night with renewed determination. 1 week left. 7 days to make this count. 7 days to prove to herself that the last 7 years hadn't been for nothing. She sat down at the piano and began to play the day of the performance. Arrived like a storm Maya had been watching approach for 3 weeks. She woke up at dawn in her apartment, her stomach twisted in knots. Tonight she would walk onto the stage at Lincoln Center and play for over 2,000 people. The thought made her want to throw up. Sophie was already awake, sitting at their small kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee ready. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Maya shook her head and sat down. Her hands were trembling slightly. These hands that had carried hundreds of plates, that had scrubbed dishes and wiped down tables for 7 years. Tonight they would play Rachmaninoff with a full orchestra behind her. "What if I mess up?" Maya whispered. "What if I freeze out there? What if my mind goes blank and I forget everything?" Sophie reached across and took her sister's shaking hands. "Then you'll figure it out. You always do. But Maya, you need to stop thinking about what could go wrong and remember why you're doing this." "Why am I doing this?" "Because you love it," Sophie said simply. "Because when you play, you become the person you were always meant to be. I've watched you these past 3 weeks. You've been more alive than I've seen you since Mom and Dad died. That's worth more than any perfect performance." Maya squeezed her sister's hands, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I gave up everything for you, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. You know that, right?" "I know. And now I'm telling you to stop giving things up. It's time to take something back." The hours crawled by. Maya tried to eat but couldn't manage more than a few bites. She went to the practice studio one last time. playing through the concerto twice, her fingers moving automatically through passages she'd played hundreds of times over the past 3 weeks. Eleanor came by to listen and just nodded approvingly when Maya finished. "You're ready," Eleanor said. "Trust yourself." At 4 in the afternoon, Maya went back to her apartment to get dressed. Hanging on her closet door was a gown that had been delivered the week before, another gift from the anonymous donor who she now knew was Richard. It was deep blue, elegant, but not ostentatious. When she put it on, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. Sophie helped her with her hair, pinning it up in a simple but sophisticated style. "You look beautiful," she said. "Mom and Dad would be so proud." Maya had to look away before she started crying and ruined her makeup. The car arrived at 5:30. Sophie rode with her to Lincoln Center, holding her hand the whole way. When the building came into view, Maya's heart started pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The marquee outside displayed her name, Maya Rodriguez, guest soloist. She stared at those words like they belonged to someone else. Backstage was controlled chaos. Orchestra members warming up, stage crew moving equipment, the conductor reviewing last-minute notes. Maya stood in the wings listening to the audience filing into their seats. The murmur of 2,000 conversations, 2,000 people who had paid to be here, who expected something extraordinary. Eleanor found her there looking pale and terrified. "Breathe," Eleanor said firmly. "Just breathe. You've done this piece 100 times in the past 3 weeks. Tonight is no different. Tonight is completely different," Maya said. "This is Lincoln Center. This is the New York Philharmonic." This is your moment," Eleanor interrupted. "Everything that's happened, everything you've survived, it all led here. Don't waste it being afraid." A stage manager called out 5 minutes. Maya felt like she might actually pass out. She closed her eyes and thought about that night at the Sterling Room, about Richard's smug face as he offered her money to play, about the humiliation she'd felt, and the fire that had ignited inside her, about choosing to play not despite the humiliation, but because of it. She thought about her parents, about playing for her mother while dinner cooked, about her father's hand on her shoulder, listening with his eyes closed, telling her she could do anything. She thought about Sophie, about the choice she'd made 7 years ago, and the choice she was making now, about how sometimes love means sacrificing, and sometimes it means letting yourself reach for something more. The stage manager touched her arm. "You're on." Maya walked onto the stage. The lights were bright and hot. The audience stretched back into darkness, an ocean of faces she couldn't quite see. The orchestra sat ready, instruments poised. The conductor smiled at her encouragingly. She crossed to the piano and sat down. The bench was the right height. The pedals were positioned perfectly. Everything was exactly as it should be. She took a breath and placed her hands on the keys. For one horrible moment, her mind went completely blank. She couldn't remember the opening notes, couldn't remember how the piece started. Panic rose in her throat. Then she heard her mother's voice in her head, a memory from childhood. "Don't think it, baby, feel it. The music knows where it wants to go." Maya closed her eyes. She felt the keys beneath her fingers. She felt the weight of the silence in the hall. And she felt the music, waiting inside her like it had been waiting for 7 years. She began to play. The opening notes floated out into the darkness, delicate and questioning. The orchestra came in behind her, strings and winds weaving around the piano line. Maya felt herself relax into the music, letting it carry her. Her fingers moved across the keys with growing confidence. The first movement built and swelled. Maya poured everything into it, all the loss and longing and hope. The audience disappeared. The stage disappeared. There was only the piano and the orchestra and the music binding them together. She reached the second movement and the piece became tender, almost fragile. Her touch lightened. Each note hung carefully in space. This was the section she'd struggled with most in practice, the part that required not just technical skill but emotional vulnerability. Tonight it flowed from her fingers like water, like it had been waiting to be released. Somewhere in the audience, Sophie was crying. Eleanor was smiling. Richard was sitting very still, hardly breathing. The conductor had tears in his eyes as he guided the orchestra through the delicate accompaniment. The third movement arrived like a sunrise. Fast, powerful, demanding every bit of skill Maya possessed. Her hands flew across the keys in the complex passages, The orchestra surged behind her. The music built higher and higher, racing toward the climax. Maya's whole body was involved now, leaning into the keys, putting her full weight behind the powerful chords. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but she didn't notice. She was inside the music completely, riding the wave toward shore. The final crescendo came. Every instrument in the orchestra played together, a wall of sound with the piano cutting through it like light through clouds. Maya's hand struck the keys with precision and power, delivering each note exactly where it needed to be. And then, the final chord. She played it and held it, letting it ring out into the vast space of the hall. The sound slowly faded. The orchestra's last notes died away. Silence fell. Maya kept her hands on the keys, her head bowed, breathing hard. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Then someone in the audience stood up. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, the entire hall was on its feet. The applause was deafening, thunderous, washing over the stage like a physical force. Maya stood and turned to face the audience. The lights had come up enough that she could see faces now. She could see Sophie in the front row, tears streaming down her face. She could see Eleanor beaming with pride. She could see Richard clapping hard, his expression one of pure joy. The conductor came over and embraced her. The orchestra was applauding too, tapping their bows against their instruments in the traditional musical gesture of respect. The audience kept clapping, the ovation going on and on, refusing to stop. Maya took her bows, feeling overwhelmed and grateful and more alive than she'd felt in years. This was real. This was happening. She'd climbed back from the impossible and found her way home. 3 months later, Maya sat in a small community center in Brooklyn, watching a 7-year-old girl named Destiny struggle through a beginner's piano exercise. The girl's hands were small and uncertain on the keys, but there was determination in her face. "Good," Maya said encouragingly. "Now try it again, a little slower this time." Teaching had never been her dream at Juilliard. Performing had been everything back then. But somewhere in the past few months, she'd discovered something unexpected. She loved this. Loved seeing kids discover music. Loved watching that moment when something clicked and they realized they could do more than they thought. The community center program had been Eleanor's idea. They brought in professional musicians to teach underprivileged kids for free. Maya taught 3 days a week, and on the other days she performed. Small concerts mostly, chamber music and recitals. Nothing as grand as Lincoln Center, but meaningful in different ways. She was making enough to support herself and even save a little. Sophie had graduated last month with her engineering degree and already had a job lined up. They still lived in the same small apartment, but now it had a piano. A beautiful upright that Maya practiced on every morning. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. He'd become an unlikely friend over the past few months. "Saw your interview in the Times, very proud. Lunch next week?" She smiled and replied yes. Life was strange sometimes. The man who'd humiliated her had inadvertently given her back her life. She'd never forget that night at the Sterling Room. But she'd also never forget that sometimes the worst moments led to the best transformations. Destiny finished her exercise, looking up hopefully. "Was that better?" "That was perfect," Maya said. "You're really getting it. Want to try something a little harder?" The girl's eyes lit up. "Yes." Maya pulled out a new piece of music, something with a pretty melody that wouldn't be too challenging. As Destiny started playing, Maya felt that familiar warmth in her chest. This was what music was supposed to be. Not just performance, not just applause, but connection. Teaching someone else that they could create beauty with their own hands. She thought about her journey, from Juilliard to the Sterling Room to Lincoln Center to here. All the pain and sacrifice and unexpected grace. All the ways life knocked you down and sometimes, if you were lucky, gave you a hand back up. Destiny hit a wrong note and giggled. "Oops, that's okay," Maya said. "Try again. Music isn't about being perfect. It's about telling your truth." As she watched the girl play, Maya realized she'd finally found what she'd been looking for. Not fame or recognition or even performing again, though those things were nice. She'd found peace. She'd found purpose. She'd found her way back to the person she was always meant to be. And that was worth more than any standing ovation.